There is a village in India that no longer exists on any map. Not because of a flood, not because of war, because of an elephant. One elephant. And the terrifying part? She had been waiting for 11 years. We like to think of elephants as gentle giants, symbols of wisdom, of patience, of grace. We put them on temples, on good luck charms, on the covers of children's books. We teach our kids that elephants are kind, but what we don't tell our kids, what we barely admit to ourselves, is that elephants remember everything, every face, every voice, every act of cruelty done to them in the dark. And sometimes they come back to collect. This is not a story about animal instinct. This is not a story about nature being unpredictable. This is a story about something far more unsettling. This is a story about grief, about rage, about a kind of intelligence that humanity is only beginning to understand, and that some people learned about far too late. The truth about elephants is not what you were taught, and once you hear it, you will never look at one the same way again. To understand why elephants never forget revenge, you have to first understand how they remember it all. The elephant brain is extraordinary. It is the largest brain of any land animal on Earth, 3 times the volume of a human brain in terms of sheer mass. It is not just the size that matters, it is the structure. Elephants possess a hippocampus, the region responsible for memory and emotion, that is far more developed, far more complex than any scientist originally predicted. In the 1990s, researchers began noticing something strange. Elephants who had been separated for decades, placed in different sanctuaries, different countries, different continents, when brought back together would greet each other with a level of recognition that stunned their caretakers. They would touch each other's faces with their trunks. They would rumble low, deep calls that the researchers had never heard before. They were not just recognizing each other, they were remembering. But memory in elephants is not neutral. It is not like a photograph stored in a drawer. Elephant memory is emotional. It is soaked in feeling. When an elephant remembers something, they do not just recall the image. They re-experience it. The joy, the fear, the loss, the pain. And herein lies the part that nobody wants to talk about. Because if they remember love that deeply, they remember trauma just as deeply. Poachers have known this for a long time. Not because they studied it in a lab, but because they learned it the hard way, in the field, in the dark, in moments they never spoke about afterward. There is a documented case from Zimbabwe that researchers call the Hwanga incident. In 2013, a young bull elephant was found dead near a watering hole. The rangers who discovered him initially assumed natural causes. Drought, perhaps, or disease. But the tracks around the body told a different story. There were human footprints, a makeshift camp nearby, signs of a group that had moved through, taken what they wanted, and disappeared. The elephant herd that had been with that young bull vanished from the area. 3 months later, near a village 14 kilometers away, a man was found dead in his field. The cause of death was trampling. Repeated, deliberate trampling. The tracks that surrounded his body matched not one elephant, but a group, moving together, in coordination. The rangers could not prove anything. Officially, it was logged as a tragic accident, but the senior ranger who investigated, a man named Elias, who had worked those plains for 30 years, said something quietly to his colleagues that was never included in any official report. He said, they knew exactly where to find him. This is where science and something far more ancient begin to overlap. In 2006, a study published in the journal Biological Letters confirmed what field researchers had suspected for years. Elephants can identify individual human beings not just by sight, but by smell, by voice, by gait, by the specific pattern of how a person moves through the world. They can track a single human being across distances of 30 kilometers or more. They do not forget faces, they do not forget voices, and they absolutely do not forget pain. Dr. Karen McComb, one of the world's leading elephant researchers, spent years studying a herd in Amboseli National Park in Kenya. What she found was not just remarkable, and what it was deeply, philosophically disturbing. The elephants in her study were able to distinguish between the voices of the Maasai, a community that had historically come into conflict with elephants over cattle, and the Kamba people, who did not. When they heard a Maasai voice, even through a loudspeaker, the herd would cluster, would go silent, would move their young to the center. They were not reacting to the sound of a human voice. They were reacting to the memory of what that voice had once meant. Now take that knowledge, sit with it for a moment, because what it means is this. If an elephant can carry the memory of a group conflict across generations, if a calf born long after a traumatic event can inherit its mother's fear response, can inherit her wariness, her distrust, then what happens when the trauma is not just fear? What happens when the trauma is loss? In northern India, in the state of Jharkhand, there is a herd that locals have been talking about for over a decade. They call her the one who counts. A matriarch, old, enormous, with a distinctive notch in her left ear from a snare she walked away from 30 years ago. She has destroyed more than a dozen villages, not at random, not in a panic. She moves methodically, she approaches at night, she bypasses crops, bypasses water sources, bypasses everything that an elephant in distress would normally target first. She goes directly to the structures, to the homes, and she tears them apart from the inside out. Locals say she is looking for someone. Wildlife authorities say that is anthropomorphism, that we are projecting human motive onto animal behavior, that she is simply an elephant who has learned to associate human settlements with danger and is responding with aggression. But here's what the wildlife authorities do not explain: the pattern of her attacks, why she has returned to the same 3 villages 7 times over the course of 9 years, why she leaves other settlements completely untouched, why the destruction in each of those 3 villages is always concentrated in the same part of the settlement, the eastern edge, where the poachers camped in 1994, the year her calf was taken. Nobody was ever charged, no one was ever arrested. The case was closed in 1997. She did not close it. In 2019, a man was killed on the outskirts of one of those villages, a retired man, living quietly, by all accounts unremarkable. The investigation found elephant tracks, a single animal, moving alone, directly to his home, directly to him. His name appeared nowhere in any wildlife report from 1994, but his photograph was in the local newspaper that year, standing with the other men, near the eastern edge of the camp. The truth is not that elephants are dangerous. The truth is that elephants are just, not in the way we are just, with courts and evidence and the illusion of fairness, in the way that nature is just, patient, absolute, without mercy and without error. They watch us build our lives, they watch us grow old, they watch us convince ourselves that enough time has passed, that what was done in the dark stayed in the dark. And then one night, in the silence before dawn, you hear something moving through the trees. Something heavy, something that is not forgotten. We entered their world. We took their children. We cut their families apart for ivory, for sport, for trophies we hung on walls in rooms that smelled like cigars and pride. We did all of this and told ourselves they were just animals, that they didn't understand, that they wouldn't remember. But they remembered everything, every name, every face, every footstep in the dark. The most dangerous thing in the wild is not a predator with teeth. It is not venom or speed or brute strength. It is a creature with a perfect memory, and nothing left to lose. The next time you see an elephant, look into its eyes. Really look. Because somewhere behind that stillness, behind that ancient, impossible calm, there is a mind that has been keeping score, and it has never once forgotten your face.